Hello and welcome to this special MPW Trailblazer edition of the Aid Station. I'm Chris Robb, and today hugely excited to be heading across to Chicago. We meet Nicole Lockwood, who is the volunteer manager at Chicago Event Management, and we've recognized Nicole as our MPW Trailblazer for North America. Hi Nicole, great to meet you.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. We were talking beforehand as you've just had a nice dump of snow. I saw some beautiful pictures overnight, so fresh in the middle of winter there. And love to start with hearing a little bit about your backstory. Tell us a little bit about the Nicole story, please.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I manage the volunteer program for Chicago Event Management, and we produce the Bank of America Chicago Marathon and a few other running events across the year. But my beginnings in the running industry were actually as a volunteer. I remember sorting mailings by zip code on the floor of my grandparents' garage and handing out t-shirts at expos. And despite these things seeming a little bit mundane, it was the energy of the race that brought me back. And I really enjoyed being part of something bigger than myself as well. And I took up running myself in junior high, continued through college. When I graduated, I decided to move to Chicago, and my uncle, who's been involved in the running industry for many years, introduced me to Joel Feinberg, who owned the last mom and pop running store in Chicago at the time, and Mike and Carrie at CEM. So that summer I was working part-time at Universal Soul selling shoes, and I helped at a CEM event, which ironically was not a running event. And when the volunteer coordinator position opened up, I jumped on it. Since then, we've grown to a volunteer team of 2, and I honestly don't know what I would do without our volunteer coordinator, Samantha.
Wow, what a great story. And, it replicates so many stories in the industry of people starting out as volunteers, packing envelopes and safety pins and the like and going on. That's wonderful to hear. Tell us a little bit about, what's life like in Chicago at the moment. As I said, it's pretty cold, obviously, it's snow, but what's happening relative to COVID, lockdowns? What's the situation generally?
Sure. So many of us are still working from home, but Chicago's opening up a little bit. We are back to indoor dining this week, which is exciting. Still with many restrictions, but kind of starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel as we see vaccine sites opening up and whatnot. So it's nice to see that we're working towards being a little bit closer to back to our new normal here.
That sounds great. And that means, obviously outdoor dining, but generally you're able to get out and about, go for runs, do social things in a general sense.
Yeah, still pretty restricted on socializing outside of our households, but able to go outside, go on walks. Main outing is still to the grocery store, but you make the most of it.
Wonderful. Such a beautiful city. I was over there lost track of it now, 2019. Obviously, it wasn't last year for your amazing event, and it's such a stunning city. So hopefully, you're getting a chance to take in that skyline and walk along the lake and everything. It'd be beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful. So tell us a little bit about some of the challenges of what it's been like over the last year, from a work perspective, personal perspective. What are some of the things you've had to overcome working from home, not interacting with your colleagues and so on?
It's a good question. I would say as event organizers, many of us thrive when we have clear timelines and to-do lists and come to work each day, whether it's an office or an event site, and pretty much know exactly what we're setting out to do that day. But given the pandemic, our work looks so much different. We're naturally pulled in different directions, working on new projects, and while we can be really productive on these new things, they may pull us away from the true nature of our roles. So one of my challenges is continuing to focus on our volunteers during a time where we're not recruiting them. We're in a really long volunteer engagement and retention phase. So kind of set a goal for myself to ask myself every week, what are we doing to engage with our volunteers right now?
And what are some of the things that you've done there to make sure that you kind of overcome those challenges and engage with them? Because I guess it's, it's about engagement, but it's about authentic engagement, isn't it? How have you managed to keep that authentic?
Sure. So as part of our virtual experience for the Chicago Marathon last fall, we asked volunteers to share their story with us. And, it was a form through our website, but given that we have slowed down a little bit, it gave me the time to actually hop on the phone with some of our volunteers and hear their story one-on-one. And if we have time, I'd love to share a short one with you.
Yeah, wonderful.
So one Friday afternoon, I hopped on the phone with one of our course marshal coordinators. Her name is Kathy, and we ended up speaking for almost an hour. And I learned that she had actually run the Chicago Marathon for 15 years, was diagnosed with cancer, and ran one last time as a celebration of being halfway through chemotherapy treatment. And after that, hung up her running shoes and started volunteering in the footsteps of one of her mentors.
Wow.
And her story was just so captivating. And I thought Kathy was a longtime volunteer. She's honestly been a volunteer since the year I was born. And I learned that her story was so much deeper, and I never would have had the time to make that much of a personal connection in our usual hustle and bustle. So that's been really enlightening to have more of those one-on-one conversations with our volunteers.
Well, what an amazing story. So she's in remission now?
Oh, yeah, she's been healthy for many years. But that was kind of her turning point, where she went from being an avid runner to giving back to the sport.
Yeah, wonderful. For a sense of, people that are watching, how many volunteers do you have in the Chicago Marathon?
We have about 10,000 over 3 days between our expo and race day.
Huge project, managing all of those with a team of 2 people full time. That's just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, we consider a lot of our aid station captains and key volunteers and group leaders an extension of our volunteer management team. They help us a lot with recruitment, and they have so many connections locally. So it really takes the lift off of the two of us.
Yeah, wow. One of the things we're seeing a lot of during these times is innovation, Nicole. And I was talking to Mike Nishi just last week, and he was sharing of how you've kind of innovated yourself. One of the reasons why you ended up getting nominated here was the fact that you'd taken this time to go and discover different departments and elements of the organization and help out. Tell us a little bit about what you did in 2020 as we sit here now at the beginning of 2021, how you kind of innovated yourself and some of the contributions you made to the organization and the community, apart from phoning up with the volunteers.
Sure. So I was pleasantly surprised to receive that Trailblazer recognition, and looking back, I kind of see the things I do as small, but I do recognize they definitely add up over time. And very early in my role, I realized I could excel if I learned the inner workings of what my coworkers were doing, even if it wasn't directly related to volunteers or the volunteer program. So started really with communication, since I was writing those for the volunteers and kind of learning about how to know what's effective. And then it went into operations, so that I no longer had to lean on all of my coworkers to know how many volunteers were needed for different things. I could start to figure some of that out myself. And over time, just learning more and more has just led to new ideas and ways that we can improve. A couple of years ago, our guiding principle for the year was experience. So how can we deliver the best experience? I know that's top of mind for many of us. Mm-hmm. And we really wanted to extend that to our staff and volunteers. So there was a training meeting where I had the opportunity to speak a little bit on volunteer management, which kind of led me into learning more, not just my day-to-day work, but how can I extend this to others. And this year, actually, I decided with the slowdown to earn a certification in human resources, which actually has many parallels with managing volunteers.
Yeah.
So that has allowed me to have a little bit sharper of a perspective on different things in the volunteer program, especially as we look to implement new policies given our environment. So those are just kind of a few things that built up over time.
Wonderful. And then am I right in saying that you also reached out to one of the local universities and started giving insights to the students and running a couple of webinars? Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have pretty good connections with most of the colleges throughout Chicago, whether it's a longtime connection of one of our coworkers, or they have a volunteer group, or they run the event maybe. And for a few years, I've been doing presentations with event management classes, telling them more about the event and helping them find a volunteer opportunity that would be good for their resume and their experience overall. So we did one or two over Zoom, so really got the virtual school experience, and we were able to be guests to some of those students. So it was nice to still have a way to kind of pass the torch on to those who aspire to be part of the event industry, even though things look so different right now.
What a great initiative. And I think, the story that you've shared about, sharing with the students, but also getting to know other departments. I mean, I'm guessing in some way that must have been all the more difficult in the virtual space. I mean, imagine if you're in the office, it's pretty easy to go and have a coffee with the ops team people and go and have a lunch with the marketing people or walk by their desk. So, how did you do that? You literally reached out and said, hey, I'm interested to learn more. Can we set up a Zoom call, have a phone conversation, and took the initiative that way and met virtually, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I would say I had a lot of those conversations and connections before the pandemic began, when we were still working in office, just something that I did throughout my role as I had time. But because of that, I had those connections with my colleagues, and it made it a lot easier for me to reach out to the ones who maybe I don't work with every day or every week now that we are in a remote capacity, so that if something came up, I was comfortable to, ask them questions just over chat or hop on a quick call. One thing that kind of stood out was our virtual experience for the marathon, which I mentioned earlier. We didn't have a traditional volunteer element to that, and I had the opportunity to be the representative from the workforce management team on that planning team, so that we could make sure we integrated that audience, which means so much to us, to that event. But it also allowed me to contribute a little bit more beyond the volunteer element of the event.
Fantastic. Sounds like a great opportunity. Just while we're on volunteers, one of the concerns I'm hearing globally is people, I guess, worried that when we do get to come back, the volunteers are still going to be scared to come out. A lot of schools are being closed, or people working remotely, and hard to connect with them. What's your kind of sense with those conversations you're having? Is that the case, or are volunteers saying we miss this community so much, we miss the interaction, we miss giving back, we can't wait for the events to happen so we can come back and be a part of it?
Sure. I would say an inherent part of being a volunteer manager that's not part of the job description is anxiety over whether or not you'll have enough volunteers for your event. But, history will give you the confidence that if you take all of the steps, you'll get the team that you need in place. And we're kind of just looking at the ways that we can adjust that a little bit, knowing that we probably will see some volunteers who won't feel comfortable coming back, whether that's because they attend a high school that's put more restrictions on events that clubs can do, or, we've seen colleges have new requirements for service learning and our event no longer fits. So we were already seeing some of that, and now we see the pandemic. So we're kind of just going to put more time towards our new recruitment and giving our groups more time to recruit their own groups. So I think we will see a bigger challenge this year. However, we conducted a little bit of a survey, and I haven't fully looked at the results yet, but I've skimmed through a few times as we've been receiving responses. And we made the first question on the survey: what are you most looking forward to when in-person events return? And it is just so enlightening to see their responses. So many people, even if they're fearful or, due to their health, need to wait until certain circumstances in order to come back, the overall sentiment is excitement. So that was really reassuring to us, I think, even though it will be a bigger challenge.
That's great to hear. You've obviously been a leader, and I'm hearing you touted as a future leader of the industry, which is wonderful as the next generation moves through. Give us any insights in terms of leadership. Have you had any mentors? Are there any particular principles which you apply to leadership of all those volunteers?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest pieces of leadership advice that has stuck with me over the years is from actually a recap meeting we were having after the marathon a few years ago. And Carrie said something that really stuck with me, and it was, the hardest thing used to be the production of the event. Now that has become the easiest, and the hardest is planning for the unknown. And that rang true at the time, and I think it's really been the truth of event planning over the past year or so. So it's been nice to just kind of think back that we can't possibly plan for everything. So knowing that being able to find solutions to problems is a success. It's not a failure that you had a problem, it's a success that you were able to solve it in time. So it's just good to remember that. And sorry, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I mean, I always say, something will go wrong. It's how we respond to it that will determine our ultimate success. And the point you make is problem solving. Wonderful, great insight. Thank you. And as always, I love to finish the aid station with an inspiring story. Have you got something inspiring that you'd love to leave the viewers with?
Yeah. I would say there aren't many stories more inspiring than Kathy's that I told earlier, but when it comes to the industry, I was just kind of thinking back, and we often say that in events, it really takes 3 cycles to excel. In the first year, you're figuring it out. In the second year, you understand enough to do a good job. And in the third year, you can really begin to execute new ideas or add efficiencies to your area. And I think this is a great opportunity to go back to that type of thinking, no matter if you're a novice in the industry or you have 30 years under your belt. None of us have navigated producing an event under these circumstances. So it's an opportunity for us to learn and to collaborate and to give ourselves grace. And most importantly, we have to remember our purpose here to deliver unforgettable experiences and connect with our communities.
Wonderful. What a great way to end. Nicole, it's been fantastic talking to you. I look forward to seeing your star rising. Congratulations again on being recognized as an MPW Trailblazer, and hopefully it's not too long before I'm able to get on a plane and get back to Chicago and meet you in person. Thanks so much.
Definitely.
For your time.
Thank you.